Part 72. So this will focus on jealousy. And when you look at things the way God looks at things, you won't need to be jealous. Um, but let's say you have a spouse that's jealous because the wizard or sorcerer or adulterer is behind your back, gives them information about things you've done when you were younger, and they don't say anything to you up front about it. So, and then they show jealousy. Well, I'll basically tear down and cast down every imagination or every reason for a spouse to be jealous because, number one, in this Western world, especially USA, um, a lot of it, people are molded to walk around with a lack of knowledge or lacking God's knowledge concerning marriage, especially on the mainland USA, and to lack understanding. And if you lack knowledge and understanding, you destroy your own soul pretty much when it comes to relationships on a marital level. And basically, if you got all of this going on via wizard and sorcery going throughout the Western world or even the USA and Jamaica, chances are you're going to meet someone that is more than likely not a virgin. And I'll just quickly go over Jose. I did seek the Lord about the USA and I'm led to the book of Jose. And one of the things I would say about the book of Jose is this. It touches on unfaithfulness and adultery and touches on whoredom. And so it says here in verse 2, the beginning of the word of the Lord by Jose. And the Lord said to Jose, go take unto thee a wife of whoredom and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing. It says it's a comma, so it's not and departing, so it's not two separate things here. It says departing from the Lord. So whoredom is pretty much departing from the Lord and yielding yourself to every other way except God's way. And so a lot of the Western world, if you're coming into Christ, you're coming out of whoredom in some way, shape, or form. And to put wizards' devices or wizards or sorcerers' devices within an infant while they're in the NICU unit without, obviously, the infant can't give consent, but without consent, and you use these devices and you're of a whoredom spirit and the purpose is whoredom, God didn't tell you to do it. It's physically joining parts of the human body to the spirit of whoredom in some way, shape, or form. Can your soul be corrupted by these devices? Yes. Can God sanctify you before the eyes of the people who are trying to corrupt you? Yes. Because once you're sanctified, with sanctification comes some level of separation from the world. So people are coming out of whoredom in some way, shape, or form. Whoredom, that I guess the deception, one of the biggest wicked angels of the deception of adultery tried to focus on whoredom, more like Ezekiel 23, a hola and a holaba kind of thing. But whoredom is more than just sexual whoredom. There are other scriptures that touches on whoredom, but they were departing from the Lord and doing other things. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's sexual whoredom. Adultery is a type of whoredom because adultery, you're departing from God's good judgment on marriage to another thing, another way, every other way except God's way. And so that is departing from the Lord and yielding to another way. That is also whoredom. So adultery is a type of whoredom, and then a type of adultery is idolatry, right? So 1 Corinthians 6 9, where it says, "Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers." Those three things are together. So basically, pay attention to that. So and Jeremiah 2:27 talks about type of adultery. It doesn't necessarily mean the type of adultery that's idolatrous. It doesn't necessarily mean marital adultery, but we ought to dwell in a spiritual marriage with God. So to depart from that and go to any other way except God's way is whoredom. Okay, so why am I talking about this? You may be with someone and they try to bring up the whole of your past or something while you are in your God given marriage to basically harden the heart of your spouse and cause adultery. Um, so, how can you overcome that? Right? Um, Cast down every imagination that exalted itself against the knowledge of God. Um, so now that that's cleared up and out of the way, we understand what whoredom is and adultery and the different types of adultery that can exist to some degree, and also understanding whoredom, um, what it is. A lot of the world is coming out of whoredom if they're coming into the knowledge of God. That's pretty much what we're doing. But in the United States, where the knowledge of God is not really upheld. And I think the current president, President Trump, is he declaring the 15th to the 16th, the Holy Sabbath. That's a big thing. That's a big thing before God. I'm sure God is pleased with that. But he needs strength and anointing and encouragement to go further. Declare the Friday evening into the Saturday evening a holy Sabbath. Um, and that's something that needs to be done because it's not, they call it Mosaic law, keeping the Sabbath day. Some people may say the Mosaic law, but really that's not the Mosaic law. The Mosaic law, one of them is the bill of divorcement. He came up with that. If you read Matthew 19 1 to 9, Moses came up with that. But the instruction, keep the Sabbath day holy, that came straight from God. And my eyes were open to that within the past couple of years. Um, and so that came straight from God. That's God's commandment. So that's God's instruction for us. So we need to go a little bit further and do that. But with this country, the level of warfare and the dynamics of it, it's 1763. They're escaping religious persecution, wanting religious freedom. 1863, and putting an end to slavery to a great degree, but it seems like to some degree some people came up with an idea to put people back into slavery using devices and wizardry and sorcery. And 1963, we had the civil rights movement going on there, but 1964, the Civil Rights Act, I believe it was signed. So it's like really hard to really progress in the growing in the knowledge and the will of God in this environment, in this country, in the USA, if it takes like 100 years to kind of get things done. So I don't know what 2063 is going to look like, but hopefully it's going to look well, because if I say this now, Satan may try to fight it, that in 2063 nothing happens. So basically, you have to understand your country, understand, the culture you're under, and know your country, know your city, know your town, and the warfare or that goes on, the dynamics, spiritual dynamics of it. So you're not like being unrealistic if God says to marry a certain individual when your ideals are here, but you realistically you're not here, and more than likely a 90 a 90% chance that your spouse may not be here considering the environment. But God may call you out of here to come up higher in Him. So it's good to walk by faith. But if you're gonna look back on things, and this is what the wizards and sorcerers would do. Remember, this country has a culture that should be banned. The blackmailing of any sort, or um, doing things to get leverage, and doing things to reproach people, putting people in adultery to reproach them. That kind of culture, that's all expressing the bitterness of Satan. That's not from God. So be aware of that. That's all happening. And then a lot of people have wizards devices in them. Um, and some people just don't know. So anyway, this jealousy, I touched on jealousy. And so um, this is to those who need to overcome jealousy and overcome, even my God-given spouse needs to see this if he doesn't already know. So I touched on in part 71 or 70, Daniel Newby. Okay, so this is Daniel Newby's 2007, parts of 2007 and 2008. I met my God-given spouse in 2016. I believe I saw him like sometime between September of 2016, and then I started to actually speak to him sometime in November of 2016. So keep that in mind. Now I already touched on in part 71 how he expressed himself. So if there's any jealousy about Daniel Newby, here it goes. Because there shouldn't be any, not Daniel Newby's spouse, not me. We shouldn't be jealous or envious or angry or wrathful or full of hatred. None of that should be going on. So let's bring this down, because the wizards and sorcerers, I'm not thinking about my past. I'm way past that. And I was doing good in God, so it's not like something God wants to bring up, but they want to bring it up. And I didn't know that there were people who are like recording or taping parts of your life as a young person. Didn't know about that. So anyway, so Daniel Newby, 2007, October 2007. Was it before retreat started or after retreat started or during retreat? There's this Daniel Newby. And basically what attracted me to him is his tone of voice and how he spoke and his mannerism. And one of the things that I noticed is that his sister also speak with the same kind of style or tone of speaking. So I grew up, as you can see my past videos, with that kind of level of hostility. So if I grew up with that, a certain way, people who have a certain way of speaking, and he has just this beautiful, it's not just the fact that he's just soft tone or low tone. It's just this beautiful tone with the way he speaks and says things. and his sister does it too. So it's like a family thing. So God bless them with that, right? This gracious way of them, how they can speak to one another. And it's obviously I'll be attracted to that because of, you know, coming from the background where, these wizards and sorcerers try to rile up things in the house and create hostility that doesn't need to be there, but it's there. But, hey, we can endure these things and overcome these things. So I noticed that about him and I was interested. And then someone said he's taken. So I was like, okay. So um, I focused on, I was still, doing my my devotions to God and whatever it is. Um, and then after the retreat, so this is possibly how the wizard used my mom, prompt my mom. She probably didn't know. So, but she would visit Jamaica, and Daniel would help her out. Yes. So, so basically, I guess she wanted to go somewhere to eat. He brought us to this Duns River Falls restaurant. Um, it's a beautiful, beautiful restaurant. It was like during the night hours. They had like the candles on the table. Beautiful restaurant to go to in Jamaica. Do go there if you go to Jamaica. Um, and just the scenery, and then my mom liked him, and so that really was like, my mind was soaking up all these things, and it's like, wow. And then I, was attracted to him. And yes, he is a handsome man. um so um one of the things, I guess, um he would come by and with another church sister, and we would talk or whatever. And boy, oh boy, I think at one point I was like, taken aback by that one moment, the environment, the scenery, and my mom likes him, and my mom likes him, she likes him. So um I asked him for his number, and boy, I would call him. And he wasn't married at the time. Well, this is the understanding, he was talking to someone else, but he wasn't married to the individual. And so I was talking to him sometime between October and February, October 2007 and February 2008. And let me tell you how funny this is. Funny. Um so one of the things that um there was this argument, I guess maybe this was in December. Argument going on with my mom, hostility, wizards. I didn't know wizards were acting up on the devices at that time. So anything that happened, oftentimes I would leave and go by a friend to stay or something like that. This time I'm thinking, let me go to Jamaica. So I went shopping for some things, Christmas time, and went to went to Jamaica pretty much without my mom. Normally I would go with my mom. Went by myself and booked hotels for me to stay in. And one of the things, these are things I don't really believe in. Like, I don't I don't think I need to necessarily discuss this, but since the warfare and the adversary and the jealousy and all of that's being played out, let's just cast this down. Because to me, my mindset, if it's not your God-given spouse and it didn't work out, and now that I further know that outside of God's will is just pieces of marriage and pieces or sexual theft or being outside of God's will is like pieces of marriage. It's not the full thing. I'm not going to be all riled up and be jealous because it's not the real thing. It's not the full thing the way God intended. But some men are possessive. You know, the jealousy is as cruel as the grave, and some men may get jealous. And God is a jealous God, but He's slow to anger, slow to wrath, right? But He's a jealous God, especially if you're like the book of Judges. Um, and the just certain things like he loves his people. So that's something to look into. Jealousy, when is it like appropriate, when it's not appropriate. But anyway, let's keep it going. So basically, um I was at a hotel. I'm not even thinking about sex or anything along that level. That's not what's on my mind. And I guess Daniel had to pick up some gifts, I guess, for whatever time or whatever it is. Um, and I called him and spoke to him and asked him to pick it up or something like that. Um, then I guess he knowing my feelings towards him. Um, this is something that he did at the door, but I didn't know about wizards and sorcerers and devices at that time. And then prior to him coming, before I talk about at the door, prior to him coming, um, I was kneeling down because the wizard, see, this thought came to me that we're gonna kiss. So I prayed against it. But this wizard was about that. So I was praying that nothing would happen. So I wasn't about just living a scandalous life or stuff like that. But you know um going forward, he comes by. Then I guess there's a part where he's supposed to leave. And he does this. This is why I don't believe in my spouse being jealous. So Daniel did something like this. That's and so I didn't know about wizards and sorcerers devices, so he did something like that. And so then he eventually came inside. Yes, we did um kiss or rub up or something like that, but we never had sexual intercourse. And so that one of the things that Daniel said the morning was, Risha, thank you for not having sex with me. That's I wasn't even thinking to have sex with him, but that's what he said. So basically, from that, you can pick up and learn, as young females, if you're watching this, that these men, a lot of them, they may get into these situations, but they really don't want to violate you. A lot of them. You have some who they're bitter and they're about that dark psychology, wicked angels, tactics and stuff that they want to do with, gaslighting and ghosting and crushing your heart and all that kind of stuff, crack your mind and crack, break your heart, break your try to help you to break faith or something like that. Break faith, whatever it is, destroy your soul. You got some who are just hardcore about that because they're bitter, or they're cold, or they're numb, or they're angry, or they lack knowledge of God or understanding, or they're distant from God in their mind. They're disconnected. So they'll act like that and express Satan's bitterness. But you have some men in the house of the Lord, they're not about that life. But they may get into these situations, especially if they have wizards on the devices, sorcerers on the devices, constantly wanting us to be aroused, for whatever purpose that's not good. But the both of us weren't about that. Um, but and so, um, but I was not. I don't think I was Daniel's type, because even at the like before the funeral of my grandmother, um, and I learned that tea is a drug, right? It functions like a drug, and it is a drug. So I had tea somewhere, or I needed tea or something, and I said, "Let me get some drugs," and something like that. And he didn't like that. Don't talk like that kind of thing, was his feeling behind what I'm saying. So, so yeah, I'll mention that. And then what happened? Then he said something. It's really funny, but I'm not gonna say, because you know he noticed something about me, and I think in that, maybe Jamaica's really hot, and maybe I would get like acne somewhere or whatever. So he would say something like, "Risha, what are those bumps?" or something like that. Just something like that, right? Because when you come from the USA or New York more so and go to Jamaica, the temperature is hotter, and you sweat more, you may get acne more or something like that. But when I was in Dubai and loving I like the bidet, and the shower. I would take my showers at the hotel, and whatever, I'd find a way to shower, and you just get a nice shower. My skin was just smooth. Please do not attack the water in Dubai, because I know Satan would try to do something like that, because I talk about the water. But anyway, and then the toilet, the way it flushed, it had power to it, and it was like hot water, and just it would flush really strong. It's not like us struggling over here in the USA with plungers and the toilet clogged up and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so basically he said something like that, and then at one point he spoke to me and said something about his car, like it went blow or something like that, and it stopped. Then he spoke to some church system. They said no concerning us. And then the wizard, I didn't know it was a wizard at the time, but I got a dream that we were married, but it's like Daniel's not happy, and there was a bunch of children running around, and Sister Nadine was in my dream, and this probably the wizard projecting this vision in some way, shape, or form. Um, Possibly. So, but once I got that, I got the message that he would not be happy. So I called him, and basically, um, I don't have to go into other details of what happened between us, but basically, prior to that, but we never had sex. So, one of the things that I called him and said, basically said we have to stop talking, and it was one of the hardest things to do, and I did some cowballing or crying after that, but I prayed, and that's how I would respond if I know it's not God's will, right? But then about a year or two later, Kimon, who's his wife, um, I hope she's his God-given spouse. But Kimon, she knew that I liked him, especially during my grandmother's funeral time, and was with me. But I didn't know that would be the person who he would marry. um, so I was kind of crushed by the news, but it's something you just have to accept. And when I went back to Jamaica in 2016, I believe I saw her baby. So for him to do marriage and actually have sex with her, um, he must have had some great love for her. So keep praying for Kimon and Daniel Newby, because I guess the wizards and sorcerers, based on certain messages I've seen, keep uplift or lift up Daniel Newby and Kimon. Basically, I guess they probably went through some warfare. So um yeah, so basically, yeah. And then when I saw God in Hawaii, um concerning Daniel Newby, I was led to abandon. So he checked out. Mentally, he checked out. Um, and so he would abandon me for whatever reason. God knows. So God just knows certain things. Certain things happen and were allowed, but But I prayed and cried after him. I probably prayed for holy angels to stand between me and him and I actually. And that's pretty much it with Daniel Newby. So there's nothing to be jealous of. But anyway, that's the thing, Daniel Newby is fearfully and wonderfully made, and he has to fulfill God's purpose. Um, just because I had a Toyota Yaris doesn't mean that, oh, my mind was on Daniel Newby. No, I really liked the car. Um, so with that out of the way, right? Because the wizard would try to bring up, well, he played the piano, and then my mom got me into keyboard lessons, but that stopped abruptly because I guess the wizards and sorcerers were fighting during when I was in third grade. So that stopped because of that. So, and I just, and there were times I would still pick up the keyboard and play by ear, but I wasn't like professional. Um, but let's just keep it moving. Um, he could be a good brother, so neither Kimon nor Christopher Delgado should be upset about anything. Um, Especially knowing the dynamics of our region and how it's set up for us to like stumble and fall before we can find our way, pretty much. Like someone said, save your own soul or something like that. And someone else touched on like sometimes you have to, I, I can't quite remember if it's find your way by yourself or something like that. So that's what Daniel, right? And then these wizards try to bring him up, and then I sought the Lord, and I'm led to do not commit adultery. So that's not going to happen. Okay. I love God's will above all pleasure, no matter how good it can sound. But you know what? God blessed him and his family to have that tone of voice and to talk that way, because people could talk in a low voice, but there's just this like sweetness and incense to to his sound and the way his family speaks. It's just from God. So you just got to give God glory for his beauty in that sense. He makes us beautiful. Um, so right now, if everybody speaks like that, am I going to go and go after everybody? No, no. I like God's will. Okay. So now that that's out of the way, let's go through the history since they want to bring up the history to be regarded. Um, and these are the things that they'll try to bring up, probably not accurately behind my back or not as they should. Um, so, no reason to be jealous. Number one, when I was a female in the second grade, there was a classmate, because I don't believe it was the third grade, I believe it was the second grade, but let's just say, just to be safe, it could be the third grade. It's been years, right? I'm 40 now. She ran her finger from the top of my head or from this area down, like down all the way to my crotch area, and I didn't like it. And so she must have been exposed to certain things who they knew about wizards and sorcerers and feelings in your body, and at a young age they must have been attacking her to try to make her be exposed to certain things, to try to groom her to be sexed out or a whore. So, or a lesbian. So I didn't like it, and the teacher dealt with it the however way. But to do something like that, that's whoredom, and we don't know that at age 7, right? Um, then age 9, I was sleeping in the bed. Now, if you're gonna be upset about someone who stole my lip virginity, right? Because who touched done that? Is it Damian Wayans? My wife and kids kind of thing, the lip virginity thing, right? Because people want perfect virgin. All right, so a lip virginity, the lip virginity thing. There was an elderly man, probably has devices too, got drunk. I was sleeping in my bed. I was just a friendly child, like having conversations. I just would have, children, they like to talk. um I'm not thinking about sex with the man. I don't know anything about that. Age 9, um he passes by the, I guess, the caretaker's room, enters into my room. She probably didn't know what he was